All right, good morning. A few weeks ago, we looked at an unlikely offering, the story of Mary of Bethany washing Jesus' feet with expensive perfume, as part of the Lenten series that some of the other classes are doing the whole series. We did just bits and pieces, called An Unlikely Lent by Rachel Billups. The focus of the series, if you'll remember, is on individuals who don't necessarily take center stage in the weeks leading up to Jesus' journey to the cross, but who were nevertheless witnesses and part of the story. Jesus' arrest and crucifixion were not witnessed in isolation, Billups says. These events unfolded before a crowd. In that crowd were women and men who slipped through the margins of our Bibles, people who stood in the shadows, but whose presence still shaped the moment. Now, you know I have to start with a question, my trademark. When have you felt torn between staying safe and stepping into a difficult or uncomfortable situation? When have you felt torn between staying safe and stepping into a difficult or uncomfortable situation? Mike?
We were struggling with leaving our Catholic community and trying to find a different one. It was like, we could stay, maybe comfortable, but also uncomfortable, or leave and really be uncomfortable and seek out another community. So that was.
That's really hard. Yeah. That's a great example. Anybody else?
I think people are struggling with that every day in this country. Do I go to the protests?
Yes.
Or am I worried that someone's going to show up and start, abusing people?
Yeah.
That's a hard, hopefully we'll all figure that out. What's best for us.
Very good. Yeah, definitely.
I'm speaking to a group of Republicans Friday evening.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah, you. Good for you.
If anybody's interested, it's called Principles First. It's a group of Republicans. One of the leaders worked in the Bush administration, and they have a panel of veterans this time, but they're called Principles First, and I read their list of principles, and they sound pretty much exactly like I think most people in this room. So, but it's kind of like, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
I don't want to really go.
That's yeah. That can cause some discomfort, definitely. What is our natural inclination when we are overwhelmed, afraid, or devastated?
Isolate.
Yes. We definitely seek those, we crave the comfortable, right? We want to, I want to watch one of my favorite movies, or give me some ice cream, or, don't talk to me, depending on your nature, right?
Well, that's you could be pathological like me and get turned on by risk and thrill, and I think any trial lawyer, and Al will agree, when somebody puts millions on the table, but it's worth many more millions, and you're risking you're funding the case, you're risking more money, and I even want to mention, and the client authorizes you to try the case if you feel it's in your judgment to do it. And so you take the comfortable thing is to take the money, obviously. But we face that decision every few months.
Sure.
And it almost destroyed my health over the years, and I used to take a handful of aspirin and blood pressure pills before I go into the courtroom,
That's Whew.
That's
Yeah, that's way out of my comfort zone. Again, Enneagram 9, if anybody knows that, Enneagram 9.
I'm just not smart enough to know that I'm stepping in it until I'm in it.
Right? Open mouth, insert foot, there you go. Well, Billups notes that when faced with difficulties, we do tend to crave comfort and tend to cling to what feels safe and predictable. The title of the chapter we're looking at today is An Unlikely Courage. Oh gosh, my hands are, I put too much lotion on. Let's see if I can do that and not ruin my dress. Oh well. Here. Think about courage up there. Yeah. I just I can't get it to undo. See if you can get it.
There we go.
Awesome, thank you, sir. Thank you for stepping up.
the courage of it.
That's right.
There you go.
Have the courage to do it. I'm gonna leave that open for right now. So it's an unlikely courage, and it takes us forward in time, past Palm Sunday and right to the crucifixion. As Billups notes, in the final moments of Jesus' life, courage emerged among who? Among the women at the cross. Told you I was going to talk about women some more. So I need some volunteers to read. We've got 3 different passages. Actually, all 4 Gospels talk about this, but 3 different passages: Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew is 27 verses 55 through 56. If somebody will look up Mark 15, 40 and 41. And then I need Luke 23 verses 48 through 49. All short.
I got Mark.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and read Mark.
There's 40 and
Mark 15, 40 and 41.
there were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James the younger and of Jose, Joseph and Salome. These used to follow him and provided for him when he was in Galilee. And there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem.
Okay, Matthew, anybody have Matthew?
What is it?
27, 55 and 56.
Okay, apparently I don't know how to operate a phone.
I've got it here.
Great, Sam, go.
Many women were also there, looking on from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee.
Okay, and Luke
23 what?
48 and 49.
Okay, this is right after Jesus' death. All the crowds that had gathered for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, this is Jesus dying, when they saw what had taken place, went home striking their chests. But all who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things.
Okay. Did everybody hear the verses? Could you hear them? Okay. What are some of the similarities between these 3? Besides women.
They stood at a distance and
Yeah.
they were watching.
Yeah.
They tended Jesus from Galilee to Jerusalem and were with him.
I think that's something we have overlooked. Yeah. They followed Jesus from Galilee. It's not just that these random women were there. They had been there the whole time. And have you ever heard a sermon preached about that? I haven't. What are in 2 of them? We have similar names. Who are the
Mary's.
The Marys? Yeah, one of the Mary Magdalene is in every one except Luke, although she does appear later in Luke. And then Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, or James and Joseph. Also, or she might have been the mother of the two sons of Zebedee. So we have some similarity there. What about the differences?
Well, Luke just calls them the women.
Yeah.
He doesn't bother naming them.
And he says, he doesn't name them, all his acquaintances too, so kind of appears to say there were maybe men as well as women, but the other two don't mention the men at all. As in, they're nowhere to be found, right? Particularly the disciples, as we know, they were in hiding. I like the fact that Mark mentions Salome, and does not categorize her as a mother or a wife, but categorizes her as somebody who took care of Jesus. I think that's cool. What else strikes you about these three accounts? Gosh, you guys are quiet. That's unusual.
Well, it seems like it's daytime, so they're visible.
They're visible. Oh, nice. Nice. I didn't think about that. Quick note, John also talks about this, but he differs from the other three in that he has additional names, including Jesus' mother and his aunt, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and once again, though, Mary Magdalene, and John himself. And if you remember, they're actually at the foot of the cross at this point. So this is the one where the conversation, they're standing near the cross, and Jesus tells John, or the beloved, to take care of his mother. So it's a very different setting than we have with the other three. The author has an interesting theory as to why each of the gospel accounts includes some different names. She says, perhaps over the hours of witnessing this form of capital punishment, might these women have set up an entire rotation, a brigade of care for Jesus? I think that's kind of an interesting thought. She says, as the author says, women have a way of organizing themselves to get stuff done. and immediately I thought, a little paraphrase of Hamilton the musical, women, we get the job done. So let's delve more into these women. Who were they? In Billups, she says, in the final moments of Jesus' life, courage emerged among the women at the cross. While the male disciples apparently fled in fear, these women stayed. Their presence was intentional. The phrase had followed, used in reference to these women that they had followed Jesus from Galilee, is language that signals discipleship. Have you ever heard that one before? Right? So, these women were not merely passive observers. They were followers of Jesus in every sense of the word. Back to, we talked about Salome. I love that Mark chooses not to identify her as a mother, but rather recognizes her for who she was, not whose wife or mother she might have been. Mark was saying here that Salome, a disciple of Jesus, was someone who cared for Jesus and his traveling ministry while he was in Jerusalem. Back to the followers of Christ. We should really pay attention to this one. In The Mary We Forgot, which is about Mary Magdalene, and I would recommend it. I have not finished it, but I would recommend it. Author Jennifer Powell McNutt, who is a professor, she's actually the chair of Biblical and Theological Studies at Wheaton College, and a professor of theology and history of Christianity. She's got some chops. She notes that 3 of the Gospels indicate that the certain women traveling with Jesus used their economic means to support Jesus from Galilee, that's hard to say, Galilee all the way to Jerusalem. Essentially, they were benefactors or patrons of Jesus' ministry, and Mary Magdalene was the first named among them. I want to read you a paragraph that she said that I thought was really interesting, and I did not know this, or if I did, I forgot it. she goes on to say that women had more financial recourse during the New Testament era than is typically assumed. They made up 1/10 of patrons of religious leaders in the Mediterranean at the time. A woman's financial well-being was often connected, though not limited, to her dowry, which I don't know if you remember, but that perfume we talked about several weeks ago could have been a dowry. So, which the husband held as a trust that she might support herself and her children after his death or divorce. I didn't know that either. That money belonged to her and her family, but she could also own property or earn money from working. Meanwhile, according to Roman law, partial inheritance was passed down to a Roman woman through her father rather than from her husband. Jewish women received gifts from their parents in lieu of that law applying to them. So they might not have been Roman, but they could have still had those gifts. In fact, women owned 1/3 of all property across the Roman Mediterranean territories. Again, it's like, I didn't know that. So, dowries were returned at divorce, and wealthy widows, which are probably what a lot of Jesus's entourage, they expect, choose not to remarry due to lack of necessity. They didn't have to. If the marriage was considered sine manu, whatever, that meant that fathers maintained legal authority over a daughter, not great, not a husband or a wife. As Cohick explains, in the Roman Empire, married women could hold property and wealth apart from their husbands. So that kind of gives you a different idea, perhaps, about some of these women that were watching and following Jesus. I just thought that was really interesting. But here's where Jesus turns things around, again, or on their heads, as usual. Just like the woman or women who anointed Jesus's feet and head, remember there's several different instances, Jesus accepted their expressions of devotion. And I would say even accepted them as disciples. So, which brings me to the one person mentioned in 3 of the 4 Gospels, Mary Magdalene. There's a lot of speculation out there that Mary Magdalene played a much more prominent role both in Jesus' ministry and in the founding of the church. But as the centuries have gone by, particularly in the Western church, she has been maligned. That whole thing about being a prostitute is carried all the way out to today, right? And her role in the movement of the church has been muddled by combining her with other people, and we, a lot of times they have different Marys, that gets confusing, all of that good stuff. If you want to know more about the woman who played such a prominent role, I would recommend this book. Remember that in Matthew, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary discover the empty tomb and are the ones to tell the disciples. She is also named in Luke, but with more women. And then there's John's tender encounter with the gardener, where John's, telling of the tender encounter with the gardener, where Mary finally recognizes Jesus and calls him teacher. So again, perhaps a disciple. But again, we rarely hear much about Mary Magdalene and the other women. Billups says, Jesus opened many doors of possibility for women. It is hard for me to imagine someone who reads through the New Testament and disregards Jesus' treatment of women. And here we are, in the middle of complementarianism. It's rearing its ugly head, not rearing, they're trying to enforce it, right? And take away rights from women. Why do people attempt to relegate women to the religious sidelines?
Allison, can I ask a question? I'm not trying to hijack your question. but
No,
I have
that's
a
okay.
question.
I might not be able to answer it, but yes.
I bet you can.
Okay.
I bet you can. So, context. So, I didn't grow up in the South. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church that was not in the South. Okay?
That's, yeah.
Right, so I'm in Arizona, you're from New Mexico. This is why I want to direct this to you, is because you were, Southwest is not South.
Yeah.
You're saying to me something that feels revelatory, or you're saying, hey, women as disciples. I've never thought of women as not disciples.
Okay.
Ever.
Okay.
I've always read the scripture as these women were disciples just like the apostles. They just weren't apostles, but they were disciples. They clearly were followers. They forked up money. They followed. They were always present. They were there at the end. I'm saying that to say, so I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. I was never taught that they weren't disciples, but you're kind of saying that like it's revelatory. So help me with that.
Did you have women deacons in your Southern Baptist church?
No.
I didn't either. We didn't, I didn't have.
Well, but all I'm saying is, but I wasn't taught that they weren't disciples.
But you were, just not directly.
Well, and maybe not.
I'm
It depends
sitting
on
here
your
telling you,
church.
it's revelatory to me that someone's saying they're not
That-
disciples.
That
as I
is
sit here
revelatory
right
to you.
now.
Right, but it's not. I think my church was pretty conservative, and more of a Texas influenced Southern Baptist church that I grew up in. I had some female role models. I was lucky in that, but the overwhelming teaching just ignored it, I would say. It's not that they didn't say this happened. It was more, it just wasn't talked about.
Wasn't highlighted.
It wasn't highlighted, yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
fair.
And I mean, and other people's experiences might be, no, that's very valid.
And teaching is sort of different from equality, and I think that's what the point you're trying to make is Jesus seemed to treat them equally.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good point. And again, it could be, again, more from my experience. But it wasn't very modeled very well either. And I'll tell you about more of my experience when we get down into it here in just a few minutes. Oh gosh, I didn't look at the time. I better look at the time. Okay, so,
I've got one other comment.
Yes.
Following up on what Al said, and this is not an answer to your question, but I've
That's
been
okay.
waiting for you to mention the beloved disciple that was at the cross, who was male, apparently.
yeah,
John, I think scholars think it was John the Apostle. But, so men were not cowering in the sidelines here. Most of them were, but there was one who had the courage to come forward and stand at the cross. I think we need to mention that.
She did.
I did mention it, but that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, sometimes it's okay. No, and John is the outlier. And again, this could be another moment beyond where he's showing this moment at the cross. And yes, John was there. And it is interesting, I think it's N.T. Wright who says, the other disciples obviously were not there, according to the different accounts. If John was there, a good reason may be because, and was able to be under the radar and not get arrested, right? He was probably very young. Maybe even an older teenager, perhaps. So, which brings me, somewhere in there I have, that is some of the most unlikely people that had the courage to be there. The women and John, a teenager, a youngster, somebody who the rest of the world would have discounted, but they were there. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition. I like what she says about the women. She says, I firmly believe when we limit the role of women in the church, we limit the roles of everyone in the church. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I did like that. I'm sorry, I'm looking through at my time. Yes, what? Yes,
You
Steve.
started with a different sermon on this, and I think, I've been here for over 60 years, sat through Bruce McKeever, sat through George, and yes, I have heard these
Good.
sermons. And I think that's kind of where Al's coming from somewhat. You make it sound like we somehow went with history and not what we were hearing from the pulpit here. And I disagree with that.
Good.
I understand your point. I understand there's a lot of churches out there that this is still not taught. But I don't want to be kind of lumped with that category.
Nice, yeah. That's good, though. Thank you for the pushback, yes.
The year, Joanna, excuse me, I'm raspy as well. Joanna and I arrived here at Wilshire in 2004. The year before that, at our church in Plano, where we were there for 17 years, the pastor in a Sunday morning sermon issued an edict that women would no longer be allowed to teach men in Sunday school. He fired 3 longtime faithful woman Sunday school teachers. Said,
Wow.
that's it for them. And said, if you disagree with me on this, God will prune you from our church. The next year, Joanna and I pruned ourselves. And, we arrived here at Wilshire, and those first few months, we heard Ann Bell, who was one of our early pastoral residents, preach. And I would reach over and take Joanna's hand and squeeze it, and there'd be tears in my eyes because, you know, after what we had seen, this was just, Wilshire was a whole different world for us.
Well, and what I think, yeah, and I should have probably put the caveat, Wilshire is an outlier though,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes.
We are an outlier, and we need to remember that, I think. Steve?
Yeah, and yet, I'm trying to actually be quiet today because we're talking about women stuff, but, you know, from back when Tim was an intern and walked in, it was revelatory to me. He did a couple of Wednesday nights about living while black, that was just talking about his personal experiences that were crazy. And on women, I remember complaining to Gail one time that I was in a meeting and this guy kept talking over me, and she said, yeah.
Welcome to our world.
And I said, and I, being sensitive, I said, I'm so sorry. She said, did you do it too?
Oh.
So,
And we're still
just,
happily married.
but I'm just saying, as men, we just shouldn't jump to the conclusion that we know the experience. That's all.
Nice,
Well,
thank
too,
you.
let's not pretend that there's not scriptural basis for this. Paul preached that women were subordinate to men, should be
Yeah, but you
subordinate.
missed the lesson where we talked about how that was misquoted.
Yeah, there you go, okay. I'm getting, moving on.
Got tired by the tail there, Alison.
So, a lot of courage. So, I do want to get to a further point on this, and not just about women, but in general, courage in general. Billet says that those who stay with Jesus were those the world most likely would overlook. The people at the cross were the ones not seen as dangerous, yet they were the ones who displayed the greatest courage. Their courage, their devotion, and their discipleship stand as a testimony, once again, that God often works through the unlikely. And I think, to me, the image of them standing on the hill shows a ministry of presence. And as Heather used to say, showing up at the showing up places. It brings to mind the folks keeping vigil at the immigration courts and in the streets. And the courage of these women stands as a challenge to us today. Let me read it real quick. I'm just gonna be late to choir, I don't care. Okay, so, and I know, don't tell Ariel. So following Jesus means we show up for one another. And showing up might be different for different people, and courage might be different for different people. It certainly is for me. Obviously, I've talked about that. But following Jesus means we show up for one another, both when life falls apart and when life overflows with joy. It looks like bringing a casserole when someone's world shatters, and baking a plate full of cookies when there is a milestone to celebrate. But discipleship is more than just caring for our friends. Discipleship is about ensuring that those who are experiencing food insecurity have something to eat. It is standing beside the stranger who needs protection. Discipleship is about making space for the immigrant family, and this was written not this year, by the way, terrified of a knock at the door. It's advocating for the LGBTQ plus student who just wants to be safe at school. It means why do I always get, gosh. It means championing the gifted child who needs someone to fight for their right to thrive. Walking alongside one another means seeing people the way Jesus does. Not as problems to be solved, but as beloveds to be supported. And it means saying, I'm with you, not just in words, but with our very presence in action and in love. So I wanted to bring that around because, again, it does look different for different people. Courage does. The challenge for us this week of Lent is to, first of all, pay attention to the people around you. Second, is there a need? And is there something you can do to address that need that might take a small amount of courage on your part? Uncommon courage can start with a willingness to listen to the Spirit stirring and then do something about it. So.